Prisons and jails don't uplift communities. Communities do that for each other. In this recording, we hear from Joey twins, Fran Chaisson, and Bobby Kidd, 3 women who have been imprisoned at the Federal Prison for Women in Kingston and at Grand Valley Institution in Kitchener. While we spoke with Joey, Bobby, and Fran individually, they have been friends since they were imprisoned together at P4W in the 1980s. Joey, Bobby, and Fran formed a sisterhood while in prison, and they continue to support and love each other outside of prison walls. From them, we learn how segregation extends outside of the prison via parole and other practices of surveillance and restriction that segregate folks long after they are released. Joey, Fran, and Bobby are actively engaged in community healing through Indigenous sovereignty resurgence and sisterhood. Prison is by nature a practice of violent isolation, one that relies on segregation to perpetuate generational experiences of trauma. To that end, this recording contains descriptions of violence, including self-injury, that may be triggering to some listeners. Bill C-83, a bill that, quote, abolishes administrative and disciplinary segregation in all federal correctional institutions, end quote, comes with a budget line of $448 million earmarked for Structured Intervention Units, or SIUs. SIUs are intended to provide a, quote, alternative institutional living environment only when an inmate cannot be maintained in a mainstream inmate population for institutional security reasons, end quote. SIUs are segregation by a different name and continue to provide justification for the colonial violence of Canadian prisons. Institutional security is always prioritized over the well-being of prisoners, as the institution of prison is a mechanism that securitizes the settler colonial state and its attendant racial and gendered violences. Indigenous prisoners are more likely than non-Indigenous prisoners to end up in segregation, yet CSC describes Bill C-83 as a reform that increases Indigenous prisoner access to resources and support. The lived experience of folks who have been in prison demonstrates that these reforms fail to address the real problems that prisoners face, namely isolation from community, family, and land, and struggles with mental, physical, and spiritual health that result from state and other violences. Many of CSC's recent reports and reforms focus on improving prison for marginalized folks, especially Indigenous, racialized, and otherwise gender marginalized people. Yet we know that these reforms only further the exploitation of those marginalized communities via CSC's violent administration of healing.
So my first question for you is, what do you think of this proposal? Does it sound like the abolition of solitary confinement to you?
In my heart, when I looked at all that bill, all it is revising the old, segregation terminology. Yeah, they abolished that word, segregation, but that's just a word. They initiated something more extreme, punitive, and more barbaric than the old segregation, right? And I've been in a hole in GVI. I've been in a hole in P4W, totally different, right? As opposed to, it's a different, it's still a federal penitentiary, but they were years ago, they were trying to bring in this special handling unit to the women's prisons. Nobody ever mentioned about that. So, and they just, Correctional Service of Canada, they have a way of trying to trickle in new stuff, right? New mandate, policies, blah, 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 right? But every time they do that, is this they're revising that word, but in a different context, right? But what it boils down to, it's the fucking whole, and indefinite. Because if there are levels for programming and elder service, spiritual, whatever they want to give, right? And Meals on Wheels, whatever, that's okay. But are they going to follow up with that? I was in Max too. If they don't have the staff, you're not going nowhere. So it's always short of staff. There was never really a legitimate response, and then because in my position as grievance coordinator for about 4 years in Grand Valley Institution, I found that there was a lot of a lot of complaints in regards to this, even for women in medium and minimum. They don't have the staff to take them out on passes. They don't have this. Oh, we are short of staff, blah, blah, blah. That's their excuse to not follow through with whatever the, powers that be at national implement it. And it's going to create more violence, more suicide, whatever. It's going to be very detrimental to all, even the correctional guards. They're frontline like us. We're frontline when we go in. Sometimes they don't even know what's going on, but they're given direction, So there's a chain of command. And by the time they get, I'm not trying to defend the guards, but, there's sometimes they're, like they don't even know if they're coming or going. So, if they don't know, how the fuck are we supposed to know? Right? Because, all these bigwigs from national, they're just calling the shots, and not even looking at the whole picture.
It's only been a year or 9 months or so that this policy has been implemented, but there's no independent oversight. And so there's a report that came out just last month that said that even this thing that sounds to me a lot like solitary or max, where you're in your cell for 20 hours a day, and you get 2 hours a day of what they call meaningful human contact, on the ground in terms of implementation, this is not what's been happening in penitentiaries. So this report by Jane Sprott and Anthony Du found that 79% of people in these new SIU, structured intervention units, didn't get their 4 hours a day out of their cell, even on half of the days that they were in SIUs. 54% did not get their 2 hours a day of programming or meaningful human contact on even half the days. 39% didn't receive their 4 hours a day out of a cell for the whole time they were in the SIU. So that just goes to show what you were saying, that in terms of like actual implementation, what happens on the ground, you could have any kind of excuse for, we're short of staff or whatever. No, you don't get your 4 hours a day out of cell.
To me, a whole is a whole. It doesn't, when I think about it, was it deteriorating? Was it deteriorating my spirit? Well, I'm one of the ones that will say, fuck you. You know what? I'm very stubborn. You're not going to take me like this, and I will stand my ground either if I'm locked up or not, So that's me, though. Not all women are going to be like that. Are going to, a lot of people aren't strong in the mind or their spirit. I've developed that, So, and I've always said that. I'm not afraid of your system. I'm still a part of the system, bring it. Bring me your best, and I have a right. I have a right to speak. I have a right to live and breathe the same fucking air you people are. So you know what? Anybody that plays God is, and that's what, some of the people from National do, and it goes beyond CSC. It goes right to the powers that be, the public safety minister, all these people, right? It takes a lot of people, and they throw them all in this pot of soup, mix it all up, and I call that shake and bake, because you know why? Because a lot of it is just, they make their decisions based on information from where? Somebody that's done research, that came from an institution of somewhere, they just didn't come up with this plan. And say, okay, we're going to do this. So there had been some, like initiation to come to this point. And that's how CSC works. They don't like something, they'll go to extreme to fucking change it, to make it more detrimental for someone like myself or my fellow prisoners.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that anybody should be locked up. I mean, yeah, there's got to be consequences, accountability, and all that, But when a person is under the mental health, they're not responsible for, what they say, what they do, And this always self-injurious behavior. It's not something that they strike at some other person. The ones I've seen anyways. And how do you defer mental health from somebody that's supposed to be allegedly normal anyways? We're all in fucking prison. Is it cool to be in prison? Is it normal to be in prison? Well, no, it isn't. But we have to live. We have to function while we're inside. And, we get educated, on a level that we probably won't get educated in society. But and that's something I understand, I live with, and I made myself a promise when I got out that I will keep fighting for the women, and that's what I've been doing, and because to me, you can't forget where you came from. You shouldn't, because I always, by a split second, your ass could be back inside. So, I think people should stand for what they believe in and say what they say and do what they say, because a lot of us, when we're locked up, people say, yeah, we're going to do this, and we never hear from them. So it's a big disappointment for us too while we're locked up, and I like to see action, right? I don't like to see anything like, everybody's talking shit and nothing gets done. I like motivation. I like something to get done, you know? Violence is always going to happen in prisons. I mean, two people fight. Okay, that's fine, don't have to throw them in a hole for days and days and days. I'm telling you, I've been in SAG for the good of the institution under investigation so many times, and they have to let me out every time. So if you got no facts, how do you convict me and then ask me questions later? You're guilty until proven innocent. A lot of our Indigenous folks have been labeled with mental health, where they categorize our security level: high needs, medium needs, low needs. All of it is mostly high when we're arrested. And they don't even know us. It's based on what? Synopsis from the police report that comes from racialized, discriminatory mentality anyways from the police system. And then to the judicial system. And then to the, provincial or federal. So here we go. Do we have an easy way out? No. That's why a lot of our people were quiet to say they were even Native. To be Indian, they couldn't. They'd be going to prison because they're Indian. So we're practicing our spirituality. So that goes back into that 1800s, because at the time of first contact, that started happening. And it's all colonization. This is all colonization, no matter how you look at it, and that's what it comes to. There's no differentiate from one system to another system. It's all the system. Yeah. And that includes society, everybody on this earth. Yeah. And we got to take responsibility and accountability, and why have a government if the government don't do nothing right? Yeah.
What you're saying is totally reflected in what's going on with these new SIUs, because Indigenous peoples are about 4.9% of the overall population in Canada, 30% of the prison population, up to 42% for Indigenous women. And in these new SIUs, 39% of the people in SIUs. Indigenous people are being incarcerated at much higher rates, but then even within the prison, they're sent to the prison within the prison at much higher rates.
Anin bonjour. Gawin apati Ninatanishnavi Mowen. Fran Chaisson cause. Kingston Inda. Toronto and Dojaba. Shandora is my spirit name and means daughter of the stars. 7 women hung in the prison for women in the 80s. I was one of those women. 7 were Indigenous, 1 was white. I am an Indigenous woman, and this is my story. I have never shared this story ever because of the shame and guilt that came from it. It's time that I owned my story for my healing. I can never forget, but it helps me to put some closure on it. This is why I'm sharing my story. It's important for me to remember everything and the feelings that surround this issue. I do August 10th, Prisoners Justice Day. I do the Healing Circle, and I started it in 1989 when I first got out. There was only two of us there at the time, and the reason I continued it and stayed involved with it for over close to 30 years, I'd say now, was because it was a very important part of my life that I felt I needed to heal from. And it's taken me all this time to be able to accept what I did when I did hang myself and to be able to share my story. Like I said, this is the first time I'm able to share it. So back in the 80s, I was in a roundup. About 7 or 8 women were taken into segregation for under the influence of drugs. While I was in segregation, it would have been around my 4th or 5th day in there. I can't really remember. I remember it was about 4 nights. I never slept while I was in there, and I kept asking to see a doctor for medication. I kept filling out request forms. I can't even tell you how many I filled out, probably a total of 40 or 50 of them. Every time a new staff member came on, I asked for the sheet, filled it out, and sent it in. I know these sheets had to go to custody because they're supposed to. Whether or not they went in the garbage, I don't know. All I know, it got to a point while I was in segregation, I felt the 4 walls coming in on me. I didn't feel any other way out of there except to hang myself. I'm a pretty strong person mentally and physically. I always thought I was, so it took a lot of courage for me to get to that place, to put that, I guess, bed sheet, I would say. I ripped up the bed sheet and put it around my neck, so I'll explain that to you. I waited and timed it for change shift for 6 o'clock in the morning. I thought once they do the change shift, I'll be able to do it and get away with it because they'll be busy doing their stuff on the change, like doing their whatever they do for segregation. Long story short, like I said, I planned it. So when I was ripping up the sheet, I didn't even acknowledge the fact that I was in the first segregation cell by the door. Above me was a little gray box, but the whole time I'd been in and out of segregation, I never ever knew that it was a two-way intercom. I did not find this out until after I hung myself. And how this all came about, why I'm here today telling the story, is when I did do it, they heard the gurgling on the intercom and they ran up the stairs with the scissors. And because I was in the first cell, they figured it had to be close. So they came right into my cell, they cut me down. I was already unconscious on the rope. When they cut me down, the jolt of me hitting the cement floor brought me back. I was a little messed up after they brought me back because then I felt like a real failure. I felt shit. I couldn't even do this right. And for days, or for hours, for hours and even into a couple of days, I felt really ashamed. I felt very guilty. And then just shortly the next day, they called me. They said, the doctor wants to see you. I was so excited that I finally will get to see a doctor and he'll be able to get some sleeping meds. Well, when they took me down, it wasn't the doctor I saw. It was the psychiatrist. I believe his name was Dr. Scott. When I got into his office, he asked me one question. He said, "Did you mean to do this?" And I didn't know what he meant. And I looked at him, I said, well, yeah. And he said, you weren't doing it for attention? I said, no, I wasn't doing it for attention. If I wanted to do it for attention, I had a ruler in my cell with a steel piece in it. I would have taken that steel piece and slashed myself up if I wanted attention. I said, I didn't do it for attention. I did it because I felt the four walls coming in on me and I couldn't breathe. And I felt that was the only way out that I had. That was the story. He looked at me. I got up and left and went back to my cell. It turned out his report was that I knew exactly what I was doing. It was written up in a report. I got to see it afterward. And he released me immediately from segregation back into the population. In the meantime, I still have this charge on me for under the influence of drugs. That's why we were all placed in isolation, segregation in the first place. So a couple days later, my court case comes up. It's kangaroo court. So I have a lawyer, Chip O'Connor. He sees me down in the courtroom. They bring me in for court. He sees me in the courtroom. And I tell him, like what's going to happen? I really don't want to go back to isolation unless I have, I will. And he said, don't worry about it, Fran. So in court, he had the case dismissed for under the influence. Number one, they had no proof that I was ever under the influence. I believe I can't remember if I handed in a urine sample when I was placed in SAG. I honestly don't remember, but I do believe I did at some point to validate that I wasn't under the influence of drugs. Like I said, next thing I know, the case is dismissed in kangaroo court within the institution. It was dismissed. I went back upstairs to population. Everybody that was in isolation with me at the time, all our cases were all dismissed. I don't know why. It wasn't my business. All I was concerned about was my case. Anyway, so long story short, that is my story. I got out in 89. I was on parole for about a year. I had a year left. I got out on mandatory supervision in 89. They held me back a year because they put me under the violent offenders bill. Long story short, they were out of jurisdiction, so they had to release me. So once again, like I say, they put me out the door. 5 years on 6. I went to the halfway house in Kingston because Toronto wouldn't accept me because of my violence. So I worked with P4W while I was incarcerated, and they got to know me pretty well. So they took the chance in allowing me to come into their halfway house. It was 185 Hawthorne Avenue here in Kingston, one of the very first ones they opened. I'm going back a while. So I was there before too, because this was my second bit. I first went in 1973. I was only 18 years old when I went in there. And that was just right after the prison riot that they had in 83. They had to hold me back because of the prison riot. And then about 2 weeks after, the men smashed up over in KP. Then I was transferred into the P4W. That was the first time I went in. I got out, went back in 83, and that's when this hanging took place. It was between 83 and 89. I honestly can't tell you. I think it was the year of 87, but I'm not sure because it's something I tried to block out all my life. I tried to block this out. But you know what? It never goes away. I lived with it every day. And when it really bothered me was Prisoners Justice Day. When I was doing the healing circles, it out of respect for the other women that some did die in there, I cut a woman down. She was dead on the road. So I felt obligated to do these healing circles right at the prison, right in front of the doors. And it's always been that way ever since. Over the years, it's grown. It's come a long way. We have a pretty good gathering now, August 10th. And it feels really good just to know that the people in the circle are there for the same reason we're all there, to remember the women that died in the prison for women. And that's what this is really all about. We move further with a progress of trying to put a healing circle, sorry, not a healing circle, a memorial garden at the prison for women. I'm a little excited, so I'm kind of got to refocus here. So I worked on that. I started that in 1991. To this day, that memorial garden, I believe it's coming really close to the end. The new owners are the Dorn camps. They have agreed verbally to put this healing garden in on the property. What we want the healing garden in the front of the institution where it belongs. We don't want a plaque and we don't want it put around the back. We want it right there where it belongs. So, other than that, the next step is when they put it in writing, then I will believe it, and then my dream will come true. And really, that's all I got to say, to tell you the truth. It's been a long time. I've been waiting to share this story.
So those specially handling units are bullshit because they never ever. And I was in when she committed suicide because I saw her going out to the ambulance.
Wow.
You know what I mean? I saw her. You know what I mean? And I seen her go in the ambulance, and it was a trip, believe me.
Yeah.
Because there was not a camera on that girl. And she was supposed to be special handling unit because she's got mental illness. And she started to act like, you know, she was off her medication, whatever. She never took her medication. So, you know, they get a little whatever. But still, they don't deserve to die.
No.
You know what I mean? They don't deserve to commit suicide because these guys weren't watching her. And of course she's going to be suicidal because you've left her in there. Now, for all of you keep telling her this is how they do it. They tell you, okay, we might let you out next week if you behave. So now you're a little kid. So now if you behave for a week, but if you don't, they're not going to let you out in a week. They pull those little strings on you, eh? And that's what makes you want to just say, give up and say, fuck it. I might as well just stay here. You know, or commit suicide. Because they play those little games with your head. You never know if you're getting out of there or not.
Absolutely.
Because I've been there. And I've seen these poor kids with mental health. And they're young. They're not, you know, they're not just like us. We know, right? But they don't know what they're doing to them. They don't know the head games they're playing with them. But they used to push that poor girl. They pushed her so far. They'd say, okay, we're going to let you out of that special because she wanted to go try living in a unit. I'll give you an example. A baker. Okay, yeah. So she wants to live in a unit. So me and a couple other girls went up there and said, okay, we'll take responsibility for her. We want to help her. We want to see, you know, if she can live in a house. We'll teach her how to cook. Put her in a house with one of us, 3. Yeah. You know what I mean? I don't care which house it is, but just one of us that we could, you know, be with her. Oh, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Yeah. But when it came time, they kept playing games with her. Oh, yeah, we're going to try you next week in the house. They never fucking let her go to any house. And they kept telling her this every month. And we kept saying, why in the fuck are you letting her out? Because we were fighting it. And they said, oh, she was acting up. Yeah, sure, she was acting up because you guys are pulling her strings all day fucking long. Saying, oh, yeah, you'll get out next week, or you behave, you get out next week. And, you know, pulling these little strings. And so she'd get all excited about getting out because she has mental illness. And then all of a sudden, bam, she's not getting out. So now they have to take her to SAG because she says, fuck it, I don't care about my stupid medication. I don't care about nothing. Yeah. And then they got to throw you in SAG because you're acting up and you're, you know, then they say it's against the other inmates. Yep. And so then they have to think of their safety. But she wasn't acting out in that way. But they say that just to cover their ass. So they put her in SAG. And then that's when she really got upset because they put her in there and then they didn't let her out of there for months. So then she's committed suicide. Why wasn't there a camera in there? There's supposed to be cameras in special units. Why didn't they have that at the, have an inquest? Why didn't they have that at the inquest? But because they cover their ass.
Yep.
They got the fucking lawyers. They got everybody to believe them. Do you think they're going to believe me when I get up there and say that? Fuck no. Otherwise, they change that shit for these people that have mental illness. I care more about them than I do about myself. You know what I mean? Because those poor suckers, they're stuck. Because they can pull their strings because they see the weak side of them. But does anybody believe that? No, because the guards are professionals. They would not treat anybody like that. You know what I mean? You'd want to fucking give up after a while. Trust me, I've given up a few times because they fucked me up so bad. Because I was already weak from my own problems.
Yeah.
But they added to it by playing those games with me. You know what I mean? And it took me a long time to get counseling to get my fucking head strong. You got your small little group there, and that's where you get your strength from, is them. Yeah. Because I'm telling you, if you didn't, you'd be doing it too, to yourself. Because, like, if it wasn't for some of my sisters and my friends, I'd be fucked. But they're the ones that brought me through, and plus myself too, of the hope, and not letting these people take me, take me down with them because they think I'm such a terrible person. You know what I mean? And that's where I get the strength from too, is from the inside of me saying, you know what, Bobby, you're not a bad person. But that took me years of counseling to get there, because I was a kid on the street at fucking 10 years old. Everybody told me all my life I was terrible. So you start to believe it. It's the only thing. And then when you go to jail, you got even worse. Them telling you you're a worthless piece of shit. You deserve to be here. So that, you know what I mean? So if you don't have your friends or your own strength inside of you, you're not making it. And that's what happens, is people get fed up and weak. And then that's it. They're hanging themselves or doing something, and it's not their fault. It's the environment and the games they play with your head. And very that's toxic, what this is where we pull our strength from, is inside of ourselves. We have to. And plus our sisters. And even out here, we got to fucking fight to be sisters because they don't want relationships. Well, why not? It's Joey and Fran that's helped me get through, and I've helped them get through, a rough day, you know what I mean, here and there. So why? We've known each other for 30 years. Yeah. It's not like I just met her yesterday and want to hang out with her. Yeah. You know what I mean? But do they listen to that? No. Because they think you're up to something. But no, you're not up to something. You're just trying to get your fucking head on straight so you don't do something. Like, we're trying to help each other get our fucking life together, get our heads together, but they're thinking we're out there trying what? Get together to rob a bank or fucking, go out there and burn down a building or, fucking rob some old lady or something. I don't know. But they do. They think stuff because they don't want you together. And that's wrong, because we got to support each other on the street too, not only in jail. Because like I said to all of you personally, when you get out here, it's the same thing. They're pulling your strings out here too. And if you keep letting them believe that that's how you are, then they're going to walk all over you, and you're not going to have a freedom of life. You're not going to be independent because they'll run your life for you. And that's what they try to do out here. Well, why? We need each other out here too, to support each other.